Hello, listeners. That's the new Default on Air, a podcast about normalization in our society. The process where something begins as a choice, then becomes an expectation, and then becomes a routine. Each episode would follow one ordinary situation that people recognized instantly. Then it would map how it became standard, what it asks from people, and who ends up carrying the cost. We are a group of journalism students from the University of Toronto and Centennial College who have given great thought to what has become normalized, such as tipping culture, doom scrolling, and having multiple jobs to sustain living in this economy. In our first episode, we'll be talking about tipping culture. Tipping was once framed as a gesture after a good experience. Nowadays, the suggestion to tip has become more apparent across the places. The suggested percentages sit preloaded on the payment machine, and the pause after the screen flips can feel like a small public test of civility. That is the story, how a social habit shifts, expands, how it becomes normalized into our daily lives. And we'll ask the big question, how do people learn to move through the new norm, as if it has always been this way, and what if we don't want to go with the norm? Joining us today is Emilia from California Restaurant and Bar located at Pape and Mortimer Avenue, who works there as a server and relies on tips as part of her take-home income. Her perspective is first-hand, shift by shift, screen by screen, and customer by customer. Thanks for joining us today. In your line of work, tips matter to your take-home income. Walk us through how customers react to the need to tip and how tipping expectations have changed around you.
In terms of tipping, it's more so, it varies person to person. I feel that people that work in the industry are more willing to tip and are more likely to tip you well because they also work the same job. People that have been in Canada for a longer time know the expectations of tipping, I would say, for the most part. However, there are newcomers that don't know the expectation of tipping, so that's where I would say it changes. And it can also, at times, be kind of rough if you have a slow day at work and you don't make any tips. The salary alone that we get is minimum wage, actually, so it doesn't really help, when you don't get tipped well.
I understand, and it's frustrating, but what does tipping mean to you generally, or personally?
For me, it's more so just a thank you for going out of your way to make my experience better in the restaurant. I find that when I'm serving customers, I want to make sure that their experience is everything they want, which is why you check up on tables. You make sure that they have water. You make sure that their food is tasting good. You always want to accommodate. So for me, tipping is more so just a thank you for taking care of us and accommodating to us.
That's actually great, from your perspective. Can you tell me about a typical shift in your restaurant? A lot of people might think that being server is easy.
It's honestly a very difficult job because you have to multitask a lot. And I mean, in my restaurant, because it is smaller, I work as a server, bartender, and bus girl all in the same shift. So when we have a busy day and the patio's open and you're going inside and outside, it's quite a difficult experience. I would say on a daily basis, weekends are obviously busier, weekdays are slower. There's been days where on a random Monday I've made great money, and then on a Saturday I've made $5. So, yeah.
Actually, talking about that is really interesting. But what do you think warrants a good tip? Specifically, what do you think, what do you do to earn a good tip?
I think it varies from server to server. I've worked in another restaurant where I've seen the server go above and beyond. I just want to give this as an example because he worked in a fine dining restaurant, and when he was training me to work at this place, he was really going out of his way before his shift. He was cleaning the table, cleaning the chairs, making sure that he doesn't put the salt shakers ever on the chair. He made sure that everything was, right. And I was not used to that. Obviously, I go above and beyond for my customers and making sure that it's clean, but it was just very different than what I'm used to. So I feel that I always check up on my customers. That's my most important thing. And I don't like to even refer to them as customers. I refer to them as guests because that's why I want to make them feel like they're a part of the experience. They're not, here to pay us. They're here to enjoy the experience, to eat good food, to drink good wine, or, you know what I mean? That's kind of what I perceive it as.
Well, that actually says a lot of good things about you. My question to you is, would you rather prefer to be paid more or people to tip you more?
Personally, I would prefer to be tipped more. Both are great because money's money, but I honestly don't think it matters as much. It's good, obviously, when you get paid a good amount, but what I want to really touch on is that there are a lot of other expenses in the restaurant, which is why we cannot be paid more. A lot of people believe that tipping it's overdone, they shouldn't have to do it, but people don't understand that restaurants cannot afford to pay their workers more because of the amount of expenses that comes with owning a restaurant. There's beer that you have to buy, liquor, there's pops, there's water, there's wines, there's so much, especially if you have a wide variety of like alcohol, whiskeys, and yeah, you get what I'm trying to say.
I get what you're trying to say. And actually, when I go to the restaurant, I always try to tip at least like 20%, and I hope our listeners would too. But what does it mean to you if people tip more than you expected? And what range of tipping do you expect?
I always expect 15% because that's usually what like the average person tips at our restaurant, because on the machine it gives you 15, 18, 20, as opposed to other places when you go it usually ranges from 18, 20 to 22, I believe. So I'm always expecting the lowest amount, I'll be honest with you. But for me, I've also had experiences where there's this one time actually that I had this lovely couple come in and we were just chatting and their bill was around $30. They just had a drink and they left me $100 just because they wanted to, so there are times like that. I obviously would not expect that from the average person, but tipping 20%, I think any server appreciates a 20% tip, especially if you're splitting it with other people too during your shift. It makes a difference for sure than 15%, I would say.
Okay, so you talked about the times of the day, but do you notice patterns in who tips more generously, like age, gender?
I would say women are worse tippers, I'll be honest. From what my experience, obviously it's biased, but every time I've had like a woman come in with their kids or their son or their husbands or boyfriends and they end up paying, they usually don't tip quite well. They usually put in a specific amount, like if their bill is $70, they'll put like $5 or something, and obviously that's not great for me, but I find that men usually that have worked in the industry or just in general older men, they often tip more. I think it varies from person to person as well though, so I don't think that I can really categorize like who tips more, if that makes sense.
It does. But if nothing changes, where do you see tipping culture 5 years from now? Just a hypothetical.
I'm not sure, honestly. I think that it could potentially get worse because the prices are going up and people are frustrated. Even restaurant owners are quite frustrated because they don't want to raise their prices. I know my family doesn't want to raise their prices in the restaurant, but when you go to the grocery store and you're paying a lot of money for something that used to be, more affordable, you obviously have to raise your prices. So I find that people wouldn't want to tip as much if the prices are going up in the restaurant. And also with the use of artificial intelligence and all of that and robots and God knows what's going to happen. I mean, that's a little far-fetched, but I think you get what I'm trying to say.
I totally get it, thank you. But earlier you have said that newcomers don't really tip often because the cultural differences persist. So our question to you is, how do you think it differs in different cultures and specifically?
So, like for example, I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, which is in the Caribbean, right? And the tipping culture there, it's not as prominent as it's here compared to like in North America and such. So, like, it's optional, it's recognized, and it's welcome, like as a considerate gesture. It's like, especially if like someone did like a really great job, it's not really mandatory. So like the standard tipping rate or percentage of what people are tipped in Trinidad is like 10 to 15%. Another example, I would often see, like, growing up in Trinidad too, would be like public transport or taxis. In Trinidad, like, you hit two islands, Trinidad and Tobago. So Trinidad is like the industrial and the bigger twin island where most of the country's affairs take place, such as the parliament. And in Tobago, which is the sister island, it's where the more leisurely, like, it's a more leisurely island and relaxed one for tourists to go on holidays and stuff. So for public transportation, the drivers do not expect tips, particularly in Trinidad, but in Tobago, again, like I said, where more tourists go, it's they expect like I think a 10% average tip. And again, I'll continue to emphasize, it's not strictly expected, but it's always a common thing that I've seen growing up, like especially with my parents. Like whenever I would go to like the gas station with my parents or like to the supermarket, and like they will just kind of like pull out like a $20 or $10 bill, like Trinidad dollars this is, and like they give it to them like very quietly and be like, you did, like, thank you for everything that you do, you did such a great job, or they deserve it, because it's a generous way of supporting their work and their service to the country and to the community.
That's a really interesting take on it. I think culturally it varies. In my experience, where my parents are from, where my family immigrated from in Macedonia, I noticed there to be a difference in tipping as well. I know in the past no one really tipped, but now as time has gone by and I've gone more recently, I've seen that people have started to tip, and it's very similar to your experience in your home country, where people usually leave 10 to 15%. And sometimes people don't even leave that much. Sometimes people will just be like, keep the change. So I completely get what you're saying. And yeah, culturally, I think it is different. In Europe, I know in other countries, it's also not, you're not expected to tip as much. You know, in Germany and Switzerland, and my friend lives in Austria. She worked as a server there. She told me she didn't really get tipped too much, maybe like €3 or something. But yeah, I mean, I think it just depends on whether you're drinking coffee, whether you're eating a meal, and how many people you are as well. That also plays a role.
If you could say one honest sentence to every customer before they tap their card, what would it be?
Thank you for supporting my business. Honestly, I know that sounds kind of typical, but it means a lot to... Obviously, I'm a bit biased because it is my parents' business, and this is how they've taken care of my sister and I our entire lives. But I would just say thank you for dining in and supporting us. That's just generally how I feel. And even when I am a customer in a restaurant, I feel that with the server as well. Like, I want them to know that I appreciated their efforts.
That sounds about right, and actually very exciting. But my last question to you is, do you think it's fair? Do you think this system is fair?
The system of tipping?
Yeah, to you or to customers?
Yeah, I mean, I do. Maybe to a newcomer it doesn't make sense, but I will say I think it's pretty fair. Like I said, I think it varies from person to person, but in my eyes, I think it is quite fair to want to leave something additional. Of course, you can decide based on how much you think the person deserves, but it obviously means a lot when a customer or guest really sees our efforts and tips us more. So I do think it's fair.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today. It was Emilia with the New Default podcast.